There is something running on your Windows computer right now that you did not install, did not ask for, and almost certainly do not know about, and it is consuming your RAM, stealing your processing power, slowing down every single THing you do on your machine, and doing all of this not to make your computer work better for you, but to serve Microsoft's interests at the direct expense of your computer's performance. It is not a virus. It is not malware in the traditional sense. It was installed by Microsoft through a routine Windows update, and it runs with system-level privileges that make it extremely difficult to remove and nearly impossible to accidentally turn off. It hides inside processes that sound like legitimate system components because it is designed to sound like legitimate system components. And on older hardware, on the machines that millions of people are still using because they work perfectly well for everything those people need to do, it is the difference between a computer that feels responsive and a computer that feels like it is constantly struggling, constantly catching up, constantly running behind in ways that make you want to throw it out the window and buy something new, which, not coincidentally, is exactly what Microsoft would like you to do. This video is going to tell you exactly what it is, exactly what share it lives, exactly how to identify it on your specific machine, and exactly how to turn it off so that your computer can use all of its RAM and processing power for the things you are actually trying to do, instead of the things Microsoft wants to do on your machine using your hardware. Let us start with the biggest offender, and the one that most people have heard of, but almost nobody fully understands in terms of what it actually does to your system resources. It is called sysmain, and in older versions of Windows it was called superfetch, and the name change was not accidental. Microsoft renamed it because superfetch had developed a reputation among technically sophisticated users as a RAM hog and a performance killer on systems with less than 8 GB of RAM, and rebranding it as sysmain made it easier to avoid detection while it continued doing exactly the same things. What sysmain does, in theory, is analyze your usage patterns over time, figure out which applications you use most frequently and at what time of day, and preload those applications into RAM before you launch them so that they open faster. The theory is sound. The practice is a disaster on any machine that does not have abundant RAM to spare, because preloading applications into memory works well when you have 16 or 32 gigabytes of RAM and the preloaded applications are not competing with the applications you are actually trying to use right now. On a machine with 4 or 8 gigabytes of RAM, which is still the configuration of an enormous number of Windows computers in active daily use, sysmain is constantly filling your RAM with applications you might use based on historical pattern analysis, which means that when you actually try to run something, your system has to shuffle things around in memory to make room, which is exactly the kind of operation that makes a computer feel slow and unresponsive. The cure is worse than the disease. The feature designed to make your computer faster is making it slower, and it is doing so while consuming CPU cycles to perform its pattern analysis on top of consuming RAM to store its preloaded applications. To disable sysmain, press the Windows key and R at the same time to open the Run dialog, type services.msc, and press Enter. This opens the Windows Services Manager, which shows you every service running on your system. Scroll down the list until you find sysmain. The list is alphabetical, so it will be near the bottom. Double-click on it. In the dialog box that opens, change the startup type drop-down from automatic to disabled, then click the S. Top button to stop the service immediately without waiting for a restart, then click Apply, and then OK. Your computer will not ask you to confirm this. It will not warn you that disabling this service will cause problems. It will simply stop the service. And on machines with limited RAM, you will frequently notice an immediate improvement in responsiveness because your RAM is no longer being filled with preloaded applications you were not trying to run. The second major RAM parasite is one that Microsoft has been escalating aggressively over the past 2 years, and that represents the most dramatic recent addition to the collection of processes running on your machine in the background, consuming resources for Microsoft's benefit rather than yours. It is the suite of processes associated with Windows Copilot and the broader AI integration that Team Microsoft has been pushing into Windows 11 through updates. These processes run in the background continuously, not only when you are using Copilot features, because Microsoft's AI integration is designed to maintain a state of readiness, to have the AI systems warm it up and ready to respond instantly when you invoke them. This state of readiness has a cost, and the cost is paid in RAM and CPU cycles running on your hardware. On machines with 8 gigabytes of RAM, the Copilot pack. Ground processes alone can consume 500 megabytes to over a gigabyte of RAM continuously, which, on a machine where 8 gigabytes is the total available, is a meaningful fraction of your total memory budget being consumed by a feature you may never use. To disable the Copilot background processes, go to Settings, then Privacy and Security, then Search Permissions, and turn off everything in the Cloud Content Search section. Then go to Settings, then Personalization, then Taskbar, and turn off the Copilot button. Then open the Task Manager. Press Control, Shift, and Escape simultaneously. Click on the Startup tab. Find any entity. RIS related to Copilot or AI features, right-click them and select Disable. This prevents the Copilot infrastructure from loading at startup, which is the most effective way to prevent it from consuming resources on machines where you do not use or want AI assistant features. The third background process that deserves immediate attention is Windows Search Indexing, which is another feature that sounds useful and is designed to be useful, but that implements its useful function in a way that can be genuinely destructive to performance and machines with limited resources. Windows Search maintains an index of the files on your computer so that when you search for something in the Start menu or in File Explorer, the results appear instantly, rather than requiring a real-time scan of your storage. On a fast SSD with abundant RAM and a modern processor, this feature works well enough that most users never notice its cost. On a machine with a traditional spinning hard drive, limited RAM, or an older ProSys, SOAR, the indexing process, which runs in the background continuously, scanning files, building and updating the index, consuming disk access time and CPU cycles, can make the computer feel dramatically slower during indexing periods. The Windows Search Indexer has a particular tendency to run aggressively immediately after startup and after periods of inactivity, meaning that the times when you most In the Start menu, click Modify and dramatically reduce the locations that are indexed, removing everything except the specific folders you actually search in regularly. This monitoring is genuinely valuable. Running without any real-time malware protection on Windows is a genuinely bad idea. But the way Windows Defender implements its real-time scanning means that every disk operating on your computer passes through the scanner, which adds latency to every read and write operation. On fast NVMe SSDs, this latency is negligible. On slower SATA SSDs, it is more noticeable. On traditional spinning hard drives, it can be significant enough to measurably slow down application loading and file operations. The solution is not to disable Windows Defender entirely, but to configure it intelligently. Open Windows Security from the Start menu, go to Virus and Threat Protection, then Virus and Threat Protection Settings, and find the Exclusion section. Add exclusions for folders where you store large files that you know are safe and that you access frequently. Your Documents folder, your Projects folder, your Downloads folder after you have verified the contents are safe. This tells Windows Defender not to scan files in those locations during real-time protection, which reduces the scanning overhead for your most frequently accessed content while maintaining protection for system files and new downloads. The fifth background process, consuming your resources, is one that Microsoft introduced and has continued to expand under various names, and that represents the operating system's mechanism for delivering advertisements and de-promotional content to your desktop. The processes associated with Windows advertising and content delivery, including the Experience Cloud client and the various processes that deliver start menu suggestions, lock screen content, and the promoted apps that appear in different parts of the Windows interface, run in the background and consume resources to fetch, cache, and display content that you did not ask for and do not want. To address these, go to Settings, then Privacy and Security, then General, and turn off everything listed there, including the options to let apps show personalized ads, to let Windows track app launches, and to show suggested content in the Settings app. Then go to Settings, then Personalization, then Start, and turn off the option to show recommendations for tips, shortcuts, new apps, and more. Then go to Settings, then Personalization, then Lock Screen, and change the Windows Spotlight setting to a static wallpaper, which stops the background process that downloads and cycles through lock screen content. Each of these individual processes is small, but collectively they represent a continuous background load of network activity, disk writes, and CPU usage that adds up across all the promotional and personalization machinery Microsoft has built into the operating system. The sixth issue is one that affects startup time and ongoing performance, and that most people have never examined because the place where it is configured is not somewhere that ordinary users are expected to go. It is the collection of applications that automatically star. T when Windows starts, not the obvious ones that appear in the Task Manager Startup tab that every slightly technical person knows about, but the second tier of startup processes that load through registry keys and schedule tasks rather than through the conventional startup folder. Open the Task Manager and click TEE Startup Apps tab to deal with the obvious layer. Right-click and disable anything that you do not need to have running at startup, which on most machines includes OneDrive, Teams, Spotify, Discord, browser update helpers, Manufac, Tour utility software, and a range of other applications whose developers have configured them to start automatically because having their application in memory when you start your computer serves their interests, even when it does not serve yours. But then go further. Press Windows, key, and R, type regedit, navigate to HKI current user, then software, then Microsoft, then Windows, then current version, then run, and look at what is listed there. Every entry in that key is something configured to start with Windows through the registry rather than through the normal startup ME key. Hanism, and you may find things there that do not appear in the Task Manager Startup tab. Delete entries for anything you do not recognize or do not want starting automatically. The seventh and most impactful thing you can do for overall system performance, particularly on machines that have been in use for several years and that are feeling progressively slower over time, is to address the visual effects as headings that Windows applies by default and that consume GPU and CPU resources to display animations, transparency effects, shadows, and other visual refinements that make Windows look polished at the cost of computational overhead that older hardware handles poorly. Right, click on the Start button, select System, then click Advanced System Settings on the right side, then click Settings under the Performance section. This opens the Performance Options dialog. Select the radio button that says ADJ. UST for Best Performance, which disables all the visual effects at once. And then, if you find the result too visually stark, you can manually re-enable specific effects. The option to show thumbnails instead of icons is worth keeping, as is smooth edges of screen fonts, while leaving the animations and transparency effects disabled. On machines with older integrated graphics, this single change can produce a noticeable improvement in the responsiveness of the interface, because the GPU is no longer being asked to render transparency and animation effects for every window interaction. Icantly slower than physical RAM, so a system that is frequently swapping to virtual memory will feel dramatically slower than a system with enough physical RAM to hold everything in memory. Windows manages the virtual memory file automatically by default, expanding and contracting it as needed, and this automatic management involves periodic disk writes that can contribute to the sense of sluggishness on machines with limited RAM. To configure this manually, right-click Start, select System, Advanced System Settings, click Settings under Performance. Do all of these things today on your current machine before you conclude that it is too slow to be useful, and before you decide that you need to spend money on a new computer or on a RAM upgrade. The computer you have is almost certainly faster than it currently feels. The difference between how it feels now and how fast it actually is when it is not burdened with background processes consuming its resources. For Microsoft's benefit is the gap that these changes close. Your hardware has not gotten slower. The software running on it has gotten heavier, and now you know exactly how to push back.